Well, joining me now from Indian-administered Kashmir, we have Mirwaiz Umar Farooq in Srinagar. He's the chairman of Kashmir's pro-independence all-parties Hurriyat conference. Thanks so much for joining us, Mirwaiz. 70 years on, let me ask you very directly, who is to blame for the current situation in Kashmir?
Well, it's the absolute intransigence of the government of India, which is to be blamed for what is happening in Kashmir, because they are not ready to accept that Kashmir is a political problem. It's a political dispute. It's not a territorial issue. It's not a issue of good or bad administration. It's not a land dispute. It is about the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, who are under the worst kind of military occupation for the last 70 years. And I think unless and until the government of India understands the fact that the issue of Kashmir can only be resolved when the people of Jammu and Kashmir will be given their birthright, the right to self-determination, only then we can say that things could possibly move forward.
You want that referendum, which was earmarked in UN Security Council Resolution 47. Is that what you want?
Yes, I mean, that is the basis of the Kashmir dispute, that the world community, especially the United Nations, has made a commitment to the people of Jammu and Kashmir that their will and aspirations will be taken into consideration, and the final settlement of Kashmir issue would be made available. So the Hurriyat conference has, for the past many years, I mean, in fact, we have suggested to the governments of both India and Pakistan that either you abide by the UN resolutions, call for a referendum, and give the people the right in both sides of the Kashmir, which is obviously one part is with India, the other part is with Pakistan, or what we call an alternate negotiated settlement can be when India, Pakistan, and the people of Kashmir sit on a table, and there could be talks in terms of what the future dispensation of the issue of Jammu and Kashmir can be.
But when the Indian government turns to you and says, okay, Mirwaiz, that sounds good, and that UN Security Council resolution is a fact of life, but what's also a fact of life is that India has gone to war with Pakistan. In 1972, there was an agreement, the Shimla Agreement. This will be resolved bilaterally, and there won't be that referendum. We will solve this between ourselves, between India and Pakistan. They see it as something that supersedes any need for a referendum. How do you respond to that?
See, I mean, Kashmir is an issue about the people. It's not an issue, Kashmiris are not dumb, driven cattle that India and Pakistan will decide on their own, and they will sit and then announce a resolution on the radio or through a TV broadcast. You have to involve the people of Kashmir. I mean, it's about the aspirations, it's about the will, it's about the future of more than 15 million people who are living a life of misery for the last 70 years. And I think if India and Pakistan could have bilaterally resolved the problem, they would have by now. I mean, the fact that, right, you talked about Shimla. I mean, after that, we had Agra, we had Tashkent, we had Lahore, we had so many bilateral agreements between the two countries, but all of them failed because Kashmiris were never a part of any effort. So it's important that if India and Pakistan are going to move forward, they will have to involve the people of Kashmir on both sides of the ceasefire line.
Would you like to join Pakistan or have your own independent country?
Well, that's what the people have to decide. I mean, we are saying that let this be to vote. That do the people of Jammu and Kashmir want to stay with India? Do they want to go with Pakistan, or they do want an independent state? So the question here is the will and the choice of the people to decide. Neither India nor the government of Pakistan will decide. It's the people of Kashmir who will decide what their future and what their destiny should be.
And you've mentioned, the lockdowns, the curfews. There's metal pellets blinding teenagers, kids being used as human shields. It got very ugly last year specifically, about 6 years before that as well. Terrible unrest on the streets. But as things stand, it seems as if, even though it's bad, ultimately it's still a tolerable agitation for the Indian government. How do you feel about that? The fact that they feel that they can still manage this?
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right about it. That unfortunately, the Indian approach has been always to manage the conflict, and they have the resources, they have the money, and to top it all, they have the military might. I mean, more than 700,000 troops of India are monitoring Jammu and Kashmir. Kashmir is the world's highest militarized zone. And you rightly said about the fact that they are dealing with this problem with an iron fist. I mean, what happened to the teenagers, what happened to the students, more than 3,000 cases of pallet injuries, more than 11,000 people being arrested last year, the entire leadership being caged, put in jails, put in house arrest. I mean, what better can I explain the situation rather than the fact that, when I'm speaking to you right now, I am under house arrest for the last 1 week. There have been no Friday prayers allowed in the main mosque of Kashmir, which is the Grand Mosque, the Jamia Masjid, for the last 3 weeks. There has been curfew every Friday so that people won't assemble in the mosque, and which could lead to an anti-India rally. So this is how they are dealing with the situation. So in a situation like this, I mean, I must say that what also is what we are dismayed by the fact that there is lack of international attention towards Kashmir. I mean, every time we hear the Americans or the EU or the OIC saying that India, Pakistan have to solve the problem, they are not in a position to solve the problem. That is why we feel that there has to be international mediation, assistance, whatever name you give it. There has to be a third-party intervention.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned lack of international attention. Something that gives a lot of international sympathy to the Indian government's point of view is when Lashkar-e-Toiba or Hizbul Mujahideen kill people in your name, in the name of Kashmir, in the name of liberating Kashmir. How do you solve that mess?
Well, I think, as far as militancy is concerned, yes, militancy is there. Nobody can deny it. But militancy is not the whole struggle. I mean, yes, there are some boys, and we are even concerned about the fact that some well-educated boys, some educated youth are taking up to arms, we feel that, we don't want that to happen. We don't want them to get consumed in the conflict. But the fact is that they are being pushed to the wall. I mean, if you look at last year's agitation when this young boy, Burhan, was killed, I mean, he was literally forced to take up the arms. He was so much tormented by the police, by the security agencies, that he decided to pick up a gun, because his family was targeted, his other friends were targeted. So this is a story of every Kashmiri. Nobody wants to take an armed resistance. We know that Kashmir cannot be resolved through any military might. It cannot be resolved through force. But who is pushing the young boys of Kashmir towards force? I mean, who is pushing them to pick up stones? I mean, you are not allowing discussions in universities. You're not allowing, any student activities, any student activism. There is ban on any student activism in Jammu and Kashmir. The Hurriyat Conference, which is the main pro-freedom alliance of the parties in Jammu and Kashmir, has not been allowed to hold a rally, a sit-in, a public protest. So there is ban on everything. And, when you talk about the Indian state, they have the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, they have the black laws, which give them impunity. You cannot charge any police officer or army officer, even if he kills people at his will, because they are protected by special laws. So in a situation like this, when the world community talks about India being a democracy, ask Kashmiris who are seeing the real face of Indian democracy for the last, 30 years in general, and 70 years, as far as the conflict is concerned.
Are you honestly telling me, I mean, it's understandable that the situation is really awful for a lot of people, particularly in places in the valley when it's under lockdown and so on. But are you honestly telling me that someone like Wani had no other option in life other than to pick up a weapon?
See, if you look at these boys, I mean, that is not what I'm saying. Even the press and the media have reported their stories that these boys, these young boys, some of them have been engineers, some of them have left their jobs, some of them have been doing good in college and universities. So, they have been pushed literally to the wall because there is no scope. I mean, there is a section of people who feel that there is no scope to pursue a non-violent struggle, because that's what people did. You talked about 2010, 2008, 2016. It was all peaceful. I mean, so who is using violence? It is the state which is using violence as a means to subjugate an entire population, to suppress the aspirations of the people of Kashmir through brute force. And this has to end. Yes, we as a political group, we as an organization have so many times said that we want to engage with India, with Pakistan. We want to find a solution to the Kashmir problem. But to that, the government of India says that, we are having elections in Kashmir, for the assembly or for the Indian parliament, which can never be a substitute. Even the UN resolutions are very clear when they say that no internal election in Kashmir, whether for the parliament or for the day-to-day administrative affairs, can be a substitute for a plebiscite. So what the people of Kashmir are saying, that either you do a referendum, you call for a referendum, how the Brexit thing was done, how there was a referendum in Quebec, in other parts of of the world, or you have a dialogue process where India, Pakistan, and Kashmiris sit across a table and they try to resolve the problem.
And to be clear, when you say referendum, you mean a referendum in the valley, which would then also include, I guess, the Pandits in Jammu, include Buddhists in Ladakh, include Pakistan-administered Kashmir as well. Do you want to include all of it?
Well, of course, if you go by the UN resolutions, the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir, as it existed on 14th of August 1947, is a dispute. And if you look at the layout of the state right now, I mean, there are three regions: Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh are under Indian control, and Azad Kashmir and the northern areas are under Pakistani control. So these 5 regions constitute the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, and that is what the UN has said, that there has to be a referendum in the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir to assess the will of the people.
My final question for you, from the outside looking in, a lot of international eyes see Kashmir through a stability or security prism, and their existential fears are related to the fact that both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons, and I guess you can also include the Chinese. They have nuclear weapons, and they also claim a small part of Kashmir. And so a lot of the fears are that some of these sporadic clashes between Indians and Pakistanis might escalate into an all-out nuclear war over Kashmir. How much does that factor into the thinking of people who live in Baramulla or Srinagar, just ordinary Kashmiris?
Well, it is a very difficult situation for especially those people who are living near the ceasefire line. I mean, in the past 1 week, more than 10 people have died in cross-LOC firing. And we saw how close India and Pakistan came to each other in the Kargil war. We saw an all-out war in that region. So yes, as you rightly said, that India, Pakistan are both nuclear neighbors, and China is also a nuclear neighbor. So in that context, there is all possibility that if the world community does not come in and push India and Pakistan towards a negotiating table and involve the people of Kashmir. I mean, see, we as Kashmiris have always welcomed. We want cordial and better relations between India and Pakistan. We want these countries to come together because we know that unless and until India and Pakistan come together and come closer to each other, there can be no resolution of the conflict. But the fact is that for the past 3 years, the approach which has been adopted by the Indian government, especially led by the Hindutva, the pro-Hindu BJP, they have toughened their stand on Kashmir. They have hardened their stand on Pakistan. They are not talking to the Pakistanis. They are not talking to the Kashmiris. And they are looking at Kashmir primarily from a security prism, primarily from a law and order problem, where they are trying to give an impression to the Indian people that everything which is happening in Kashmir is Pakistan-oriented, is Pakistan-sponsored. And just to say that, the fact that, in the last 1 year, 2016, 2017, more than 170 people have died in Kashmir. And our question to the Indians is, how many Pakistanis are there? Not a single, Pakistani for that matter. So this discourse or this confusion which they are trying to create is basically to ward off the pressure that whatever there might be, that, that this is not an indigenous struggle, it's a sponsored struggle, while the fact is that this is an indigenous Kashmiri struggle aimed at the resolution and the self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Mirwaiz Umar Farooq, I really thank you for taking the time to talk to us on the Newsmakers. Thanks so much.